Cooperative Learning Lesson Plan, oral presentations. The standard I focused on was language arts, second grade. Standard 6, which is oral communication, convention, and skills. Student will give an oral presentation to share information with peers is the benchmark. And the GLO is community contributor, which is the understanding that it is essential for human beings to work together. The grade level of this lesson plan is 4 is actually for second graders, but the levels that I work with is grades 9 through 12. The descriptions of the students I work with. I don't really know all of their IEP annual goals or objectives, so I wasn't able to insert into this particular lesson. I do know, well, I'll just give you a rundown. It's a class of 11 students, a majority with autism. We're in an alternative learning environment, so it's called a workplace readiness environment, which we focus on teaching the students functional skills and some functional academic skills that they'll need to know in order to obtain a job and keep a job. Also independent living skills, etc., etc. This lesson objective I focused on was when given a lesson, students will demonstrate their understanding of nouns, verbs, and adjectives by completing a Mad Lib worksheet with 4 out of 5 correct. The cooperative learning objective, when given a group project, students will participate for the entire activity by completing a group oral presentation. So at the end, my assessment will be whether or not the student participated in the entire activity, including the oral presentation in the end. The procedures I used, attending cue, as I opened up with asking the students, just plain out asking them, does anyone know what a Mad Lib is? And then no one knew what it was, so I further explained it. It's a word game. I explained we need to come up with nouns, verbs, and adjectives to place into the story and to see if, once we place these words in, if the story makes sense or not. Usually it doesn't, so it ends up creating a funny story. Then we moved into the anticipatory set, so I just point blank shared with them the lesson objective and cooperative learning objective, which really works for the students. So it allows them to know what exactly we're working on, and then I allow for them to ask questions. Input was that we conducted a short review. They all knew noun, verb, and adjectives pretty well, except for a couple, so as a class we reviewed. Also, I had to go over singular, plural, past tense, and present tense. We've gone over that once before, but it still wasn't, it's still something new, so this is good practice for them. I then went into modeling, which was I verbally walked through an example of the Mad Lib, and I passed out visuals as well. So you can see in the middle, it's kind of a visual, not really easy to see, but that's what I passed out. And then also I allowed for students to ask questions as we went through the Mad Lib. The guided practice was I put the students into groups by which students I knew could work with each other. I passed out a Mad Lib, a different one for each group, and then I showed them exactly what area they're responsible for filling out, which was 2 groups of 3, so I had 6 students. And they were to use the help of their group members as well as myself. Independent practice was for them to continue working on their Mad Lib, but using only peer assistance. Also, I noted at the end that we need to allow for 2 minutes each group for the presentation. So I went back to these, and we'll talk about the results of the lesson for the students. So what worked and what didn't work. So for this part, the attending cue, this pretty much worked right off the bat. It always gets them, and they like new things. So once they heard Mad Lib, it was like, yay, Mad Lib. During the anticipatory set, this also works for them. They like it. They like to know exactly what we're doing. Input went fairly smooth. We had a lot of questions on the plural and past tense. and present tense. So I had to give examples. Next, if I was to do this again, what I would change is to go into depth a little more on singular, plural, past tense, and present tense, and maybe do some more activities on that, because for them, they need more practice. Modeling. Now, this was just horrible. I'm sure you've all had experiences where you're trying to explain something to somebody and all your students' faces are just like, So here I actually need to change what I was doing. And in the end, it ended up working out, and the students did understand what a Mad Lib was. So what didn't work was I was trying to walk them through the Mad Lib, asking them, for an example of a noun, for an example of a verb, for an example of the adjective. But the list of words wasn't separate from the Mad Lib. So if you can see, there's like all the lines on this middle section worksheet. And I gave that to them instead of separating a separate worksheet and having the first blank labeled number 1 adjective, the second blank labeled number 2 verb, third blank, so on and so forth. That would have made it a little bit easier for them to think, okay, we're just thinking of a noun, any noun. Okay, we're thinking of a verb, any adjective, so forth and so on. And then for them to see, okay, now we're going to stick it into this story. Now, does it make sense in this sentence? No, it just sounds silly. So to have a better connection, that sense. In the end, I ended up doing that on the board or on the back of the sheet separate, and have the students walk through. And then once they had their 10 words, turn the page over and then input it. Once we read a couple, the students just started laughing and they understood what the Mad Lib was, and it became more fun for most of them. Guided practice. For this section as well, it worked really well in consideration that some students just don't work with others, and their moods and how they're feeling for that particular day. The students did enjoy working together for the most part, because they don't get to work together in that sense. It's all job training, working in the garden, weed whacking, working together in the workplace, but not academically. So it was a different, scenery for them, and it was different to work with each other on an academic-based lesson and not out, pulling weeds or weed eating. During the independent practice, the students didn't actually work independent with only peer assistance. So, reviewing this and reflecting back on it, I now know that for this particular lesson, we'd need to go back and work on some things, and then also to practice, because this is the first time they did anything like this, and also to prepare for a presentation. This is the first time they've ever had to do that, an oral presentation in front of class. So it actually did work, the presentation, which was good. Now we need to know what kinds of things we need to work on. So our standard was just to have an oral presentation. So we met that standard. Everybody met that standard. But now from here, we could extend on working on body language, posture, voice, intonation, eye contact, all that stuff. So that would be a one way we can expand. Another way, So overall, the results of the lesson was it went very smoothly, lots of challenges, and also, that my lesson wasn't a true cooperative learning lesson, that each student, yes, they were responsible for one part of the Mad Lib, which in the end they needed to put together in order to create this presentation. But each student was responsible for their own thing. They weren't working together, which was one of my cooperative behaviors, or expected cooperative behaviors, was turn-taking, staying with the group, participation in the entire activity, and presentation of the assignment, and good communication skills. So I focused on way too many. A change I would make was maybe let's just focus on participating in the entire activity, because a couple of my students found it hard to do that. They didn't want to speak in front of their peers. And so focusing on one thing, one cooperative behavior on my next lesson, and also to ensure that I am actually working on that cooperative lesson. So focusing on the students working together and actually participating in the entire activity, each step, not only one step, 1/3 of the activity for the entire step, the entire activity. So thanks, guys. If you have any questions, don't feel free to email me. This is a good learning experience, and thank you.